Buenos días. Buenos días. Ramón Guardia de Valores y Marketing. Está claro que la responsabilidad tiene beneficio para el país, ¿no? Y el país lo forman las empresas, y se ha hablado esta mañana más que de RSC, de gestión responsable de la empresa, que es como me gusta llamarla, y de los individuos. Pero, ¿qué pasa con la gestión responsable del gobierno? Es decir, es verdad que un país lo formamos todos, pero es muy difícil si todos los sectores no abrazan esa nueva religión, por llamarla de alguna forma, de la gestión responsable. Eso no va a ir adelante, ¿no? Entonces, la pregunta es más para el embajador que la embajadora. Gracias por su exposición, señora embajadora. ¿Qué debería guiar la gestión responsable de los gobiernos en Europa en estos momentos?
I think one of the great tragedies of the last few decades in the United States, and perhaps similarly in Europe, is a declining confidence in public institutions and in government, and a declining confidence and identification with democratic institutions. If you go to the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library in Boston, there is inscribed in the entranceway of the library, this library is dedicated to the memory of John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, and to all those who, through the art of politics, seek a new and better world. That was the tradition of democratic participation and public service that we grew up. Well, I grew up with. Susan's a lot younger. Actually, I will be this next week in Boston at a big biotech conference with President Artur Mas, and we will be at a transportation seminar at Northeastern University hosted by Professor Michael Dukakis, the former governor of Massachusetts, who in many ways inspired my generation to public service at the state level. What I've observed going on in the political system in the United States over the last few years is frankly deeply disturbing. Although I do think that government is being managed a lot better than it is given credit. I think it is falling victim to partisan politics and struggles for power. There actually has been a great emphasis in the last decade on how government functions. If you go back to the presidency of Bill Clinton, I don't know if you remember the image, but I remember he vowed to try to make government more efficient, to make it smaller. He said the era of big government is over. I remember an event where he appeared with Vice President Gore, and they had literally tons of paper of regulations, federal regulations that they were going to eliminate. There's been an increasing emphasis on transparency. If you go to the internet now, you can actually see where federal tax money goes in the United States. And I think you will also be able to go to the website of the U.S. government and analyze the financial circumstances of every presidential appointment. Now, this is something that comes close to home because it means that you can go to this website and look at the financial situation of Alan and Susan Solomon. But it is an effort. It is an effort, and it's not something that we're particularly crazy about, but it's an effort to make government more transparent. President Obama has implemented some of the most serious ethics reforms in the history of our government, and preventing people from leaving government and going into lobbying, or preventing lobbyists from making political contributions or for working in government. So I think I'd just end by saying I think government does better than we give it credit for. But I do think that we are living in an atmosphere where the very democratic institutions that so many of us and so many of you sacrificed for are being undermined by a declining perception in the nobility of what they do.
Thank you. Well, I will make the question in English. Yes, I mean, husband of the wife of the ambassador. I mean, wife of the ambassador. Many thanks for both presentations. I think the examples that you gave us on different companies that take CSR very seriously, I mean, were very interesting. But having said that, I mean, we live today in a highly competitive world. I mean, capitalism has not yet reinvented, as was mentioned in the first presentation. And then regarding the examples that you gave us, so my question would be, is the market aware of these companies that are really spending money in CSR? So are consumers prepared to pay more for buying products from these companies that are really spending money in CSR? Because in the end, I mean, some companies may end up buying companies from some Asian countries that are much cheaper, more competitive. So in the short run, can these companies be sustainable?
Well, the three examples I gave, and even the Disney one, are four very sustainable companies. So I would say the answer is yes. The surveys that have been done, there have been many in the United States, indicate that consumers are willing to spend more. I think where the change has to come from as well is from the investor side. And it was mentioned in the earlier panel as well, that the investors have to also be stakeholders, shareholders have to be made aware of this. And if it's part of a company's overall strategy, not just the separate $100 million budget, which is quite large, to the side, but integrated into what a company is going to do, they will be sustainable. They still have to make strong products. They still have to, return on investment has to be there. They have to have a strong bottom line, and they can't forsake that. You can't do this if you don't have the financial resource. It does not have to be just the large companies doing this. There are many examples of smaller companies doing things, and there are also many examples of companies who are using philanthropy as a way to share knowledge, which has lower cost to it than an investment into, the girl effect or so forth. So I think there are a variety of ways to do it so that a company can be seen as sustainable, profitable, successful in this area as well.
Last question there.
Hola, buenos días. Loreto Rubio, directora de Synergia Value. Muchas gracias por todas las explicaciones y la visión. Yo he sido directora pública en el Ayuntamiento de Barcelona con Jordi Hereu antes de que fuera alcalde, pero actualmente me encuentro colaborando en un proyecto que me ha encargado el Gobierno vasco. El Gobierno vasco tiene una estrategia que es la Estrategia de Desarrollo Sostenible para el año 2020 y nos ha pedido que socialicemos esa estrategia como único camino posible de futuro para el País Vasco, ¿no? Tanto en su vertiente económica como medioambiental y social. Por lo tanto, el encargo es, vamos a intentar convencer a la población, adhesionarlos, a la ciudadanía y a los agentes, para que realmente entiendan que es un camino difícil, pero es el único camino que tenemos como país. En este proyecto me encuentro en interlocución con las grandes compañías del País Vasco, que a su vez son grandes compañías estatales, y hablando con los directores de RSC, o sea, de Responsabilidad Social Corporativa. Estos directores dependen, a su vez, por ejemplo, de una dirección de marca y reputación corporativa, que a su vez dependen de una dirección de comunicación corporativa. Por lo tanto, yo me hago una pregunta. ¿A quién hay que dirigirse en una compañía? ¿Qué pedagogía puedo hacer yo de cara a la ciudadanía y a todos los agentes, ¿no? ¿Qué les tengo que decir a las grandes empresas para que entiendan que esto es el único camino que todos podemos recorrer?
A little lag in the translation. I think that's an excellent question. prior to my being on the corporate philanthropy side, helping companies to give their money away, I was on the side trying to raise money from companies for public television. And I wish there was a simple answer to say there's one person to go to. There's not. Every company is different. Every organization is different. And your challenge will be to find as many people as you can meet with and find those that can help champion what you're doing. The higher the level, the better it is to have those kind of champions. But the more you can engage, the more you will create that ripple effect of more people knowing about that. I agree with a lot of what you said, that the branding and the marketing of what goes on, that goes out to the general public, is going to be very critical to show what this initiative is about. And a common way that we've worked in the United States is to form advisory boards to help with that, because then you can gather minds that have links into what you're looking to do, can help disseminate the information, can help bring more voice to it. You have to be able to listen to all those voices, but by choosing people whose opinions you really want will help to garner broader exposure for that. And even within companies, to have an advisory board at different levels can be very, very useful for helping to carry out what the project might be. Oh, please. Sure.
I agree with everything Susan says.
I hope so.
But in addition, I think that getting leadership from the very top leaders is really critical. That it's very hard to, not only is it hard to get something done in a company or in a government or wherever without the CEO or the leader of the company support, having that support and frankly the passion of the CEO adds enormous value. Obviously, that's the case here. You have the top leadership of Abertis spending their afternoon on this topic. When IBM celebrated its 100th anniversary this past year, 300,000 employees and family members of IBM employees around the world spent a day volunteering to celebrate IBM's 100th anniversary. The CEO of the company did a very public event where he volunteered in a school in Maryland along with the governor of the state of Maryland to show that this was important at the very highest level of the company. And I think that's absolutely a critical piece of it, and then you can build from there. I did just want to recognize, I didn't until you mentioned the name Jordi, the former mayor of the city of Barcelona. It's a pleasure to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, but I remember maybe the last time was we sat together when the Los Angeles Lakers came to Barcelona to play the Barcelona team, and I remember two things about the game. I hope I'm not telling tales out of school. One is that Jordi's sons were wearing Lakers T-shirts, but Barcelona beat the Lakers. And as Bostonians and Boston Celtics fans, we were delighted.
Can I add one thing, though? Nice to have you here, too. But there's something that the United States government is doing through our State Department that I think is worth mentioning, and that is no one can do this alone. It goes back to the question about government. Philanthropy, corporate citizenship, responsibility, whatever it is, cannot happen single-handedly, and it is a partnership between government, between individuals, and the company. And I was going to mention, you might want to describe it better, the global Chris Balderson's area at the State Department. It's kind of interesting.
Well, as big and powerful as the United States government is, with I think we can't, the government recognizes that it can't do everything alone as well. And so it has created what it calls public-private partnerships, which I know also exist here. Actually, they exist in the commercial world because I know the work that Abertis is doing in Puerto Rico is the result of a public-private partnership. The State Department has an office of public-private partnership to make social investments using both the public sector and the private sector. And one example, which Spain is involved in, it revolves around providing clean stoves for people in developing countries. In many developing countries, many families cook using wood stoves, and they cook with unsafe appliances that from which millions of women, mothers, and their children die every year. It's actually, some of the data is absolutely astounding what a significant public health problem this is in so many countries, affecting so many millions of people. And so, because of the leadership of Secretary of State Clinton and her decision that she wanted to have an impact on this, she has organized support from countries around the world, including Spain. When Secretary Clinton visited Spain last July, they made an announcement with then Foreign Minister Trinidad Jimenez that Spain would begin to participate in the Clean Cook Stove program. One of the spokespersons for this program is the great Spanish chef living in the United States, Jose Andres. When the earthquake hit Haiti, Jose Andres went to Haiti with actually solar-powered stoves so that they could bring it to areas that had their power knocked out. But in this public-private partnership and this clean stove program, the Secretary has not only engaged other governments, but has engaged multinational companies to be partners in this and to put up a good deal of the money to distribute millions of clean stoves to developing countries to try to really help with a very preventable public health problem. Thank you.
Last short question, the last short answer. Thank you. Ángel Pérez from CaixaBank. Quería preguntar, antes ha salido en la sesión anterior el peso que tiene la divulgación de la responsabilidad corporativa por parte de las empresas a través, por ejemplo, de los índices de sostenibilidad o de la participación de las empresas en proyectos como el del Global Compact, ¿no? El Pacto Mundial. ¿Hasta qué punto este tipo de incentivos se produce también en las empresas de Estados Unidos? Es decir, ¿hasta qué punto, además de hacer actividades de responsabilidad corporativa, participan en proyectos globales tipo Global Compact o índices de sostenibilidad?
I think companies in the United States do participate in surveys and in rankings. I can't address whether they specifically do the Global Compact or not. I don't know the answer there. Maybe you do. But they do. And these rankings are important. And there are also organizations that give out sort of a seal of approval for corporate social responsible companies. There used to be a magazine in the United States called Good Housekeeping. It still exists. And the Good Housekeeping had a seal of approval. And people would buy things because they saw that seal of approval. Those kind of rankings are coming out now. So, for example, on products like clothing, it might say that this was not made with, labor practices were all adhered to. Or in coffee, fair trade practices for employee hires. People will buy those products sooner than others. There's a great shoe company called Tom's. They are inexpensively made. They're sort of like espadrilles. But for every pair you buy, they donate a pair to a developing world child or adult that needs them. Their profits have soared. They can't keep up with demand. But it's been marketed and it's been shown with kinds of rankings. Little different than the ones that we heard about in the first session, but they are ways that they can promote that kind of endeavor because they believe in it.
Can I just make, can I No, I just want to make a general comment about corporate social responsibility in Spain. I said earlier that we came to Spain thinking that there were some things that about civil society and about citizen service and citizen engagement that we could share with our Spanish colleagues and friends. The thing that has impressed us, or at least impressed me the most, is the commitment of business in Spain to corporate social responsibility. I would say that this is absolutely one of the great strengths of this country, frankly. I thought about this when the gentleman from CaixaBank introduced himself. I remember going the first time I met Isidore Fainé. What he wanted to talk to me about was the social investments that the bank was making, as opposed to what I wanted to know about, which was what he thought about the banking sector. And I remember going to a program where the bank was sending 140 graduate students from Spain to the greatest universities in the world, half of them in the United States, to pursue master's and PhD studies, a completely free ride. And we continue to be impressed with the work that's being done by the corporate community in Spain to make both Spain and the world a better place. And I think that when we go back someday, one of the things that we will bring back that we think we can teach our friends in the United States is the things that you're doing in that arena. And I just want to express our compliments and humbly thank you for including us in this program.